OCO, hello. Welcome everyone to Indigenizing Disability Justice. So excited to see so many people here in this space tonight with us. As well as online. So I want to give a special shout out to our community partners on Loading Lands, known as Oakland, California, who are doing the watch party right now, as well as the other people joining us from around the world. So, yay. So I am Deerinwater. I am the founding executive director of Relaunch. I am a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. I am multiply disabled, queer, and a journalist and organizer. I live here on scholarly lands, originally though from Wanda, Oklahoma. I'm going to give a brief image description of myself for those who may not be able to see me. So I am a light complected native two-spirit woman. I have brown hair, black glasses. I'm wearing a blue keffiyeh, a purple t-shirt, and a yellow ribbon skirt with hummingbirds on it and yellow moccasins. So I want to acknowledge that we're currently on the ancestral lands of the Acknowledgement and the Piscataway people. These lands and their caretakers are significantly older than the so-called United States or Washington, D.C. I want to honor those that came before us, those who are with us now, and all of our future ancestors. We wouldn't be here without those that came before us, and we must think about how our actions today impact those that will come after us. However, land acknowledgements will never be enough. Crushing colonialism demands the return of all lands to the rightful indigenous nations of those lands. This also includes Palestinian lands. As we stand with the Palestinian people who are suffering genocide, it is being wholeheartedly supported through a variety of measures that include supplying munitions, financial aid, and state surveillance and violence by many of the very people who work in this city. None of us are free until we're all free. So I'm going to tell you all a little bit about our organization. So Crushing Colonialism is an Indigenous-led nonprofit in the so-called United States that uplifts Indigenous people through traditional storytelling, which includes arts, media, and journalism. I founded the organization in 2016, and we are operated by Indigenous people working in a variety of storytelling fields across the world. We work to increase the pay and employment of Indigenous storytellers while also promoting their work and increasing access to professional representation. We produce international reporting and organizing to inform and empower marginalized community members to create professional opportunities and advocate for the just funding and employment of Indigenous storytellers. And doing this, we control our narratives in order to crush colonialism. So I'll give you a little brief rundown about some of the programming we have before we get started. Let me also, I apologize, I did not give a little housekeeping. So this is Billy. He is our ASL interpreter. And I apologize, and let's see how that's for pronouns. So since I mentioned the magazine, I'll let you all know about that. I see some of you have it. So the magazine takes an Indigenous lens to worldly issues like disability justice, women's rights, Afro-Indigeneity, the arts, and 2S LGBTQIA+ issues. The magazine is an international quarterly publication available in both a hard copy and a digital version in both English and Spanish. The digital version is free, and for the hard copy, we offer currently up to 400 free copies to our Indigenous relatives who are on the other side of the digital divide, meaning they can't easily access our online content. Our publication is also available for purchase. You can subscribe online. You can also sign up for our email list. You'll definitely find out about every digital edition that comes out. You can always look at our website, crushingcolonialism.org. And we ship internationally, and we've even started a small task pilot to get the magazine into jails and prisons as well. The other thing we have going on, really big, exciting stuff, especially for those of you that are here in so-called Washington, D.C., is our Decolonized Indigenous World Pride programming. I just call it DBIWP for short. So it is multi-year programming happening. That we're so happy to announce tonight. We actually have someone here with us who is a part of this over there. So Decolonized Indigenous World Pride is an international Indigenous peer-led multi-year event and programming series culminating with 2 weeks of events, May 23rd to June 8th, 2025, here in so-called Washington, D.C., to be held at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. That's right, queer natives from around the world are taking over a Smithsonian. The event and media series celebrates the work of 2S, LGBTQIA+, and more Indigenous storytellers, artists, and performers. And we actually had a kickoff event on Treaty 1 territory known as Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, on August 11th, 2023. And that is available to watch on our website or our YouTube channel. As part of the DBIWP programming, we actually have right now an application open for 5 queer Indigenous youth from anywhere in the world, ages 18 to 25, to learn and produce a 5 to 10 minute film over the course of 4 months. It's 1 2-hour workshop a month for 4 months, being led by Theo Hutland and Fallon Smart, who are both Indigenous Two-Spirit trans filmmakers from so-called Canada. At the end of the training, every student will be paid $500 US. We will also, if they're able to travel, fly them in here to DC, screen their movies, and have them take part in a moderated conversation after. Because while we're here to support the folks already doing storytelling, we want to make sure that everyone who wants to do this work has opportunities. And so the application process is open until May 31st. There's information on our website and our social media accounts. It's just a couple of short questions that can be emailed to us in a typed written form, audio or video. And we will take and work with anyone who speaks any language. You don't have to speak English. You just have to know ahead of time so that we can ensure we have translators. And we will accept applications in other languages and have them translated. So good stuff that we're doing. And then one last thing to mention, we've actually relaunched our website, crushingcolonialism.org. And on it is a shop. We're still doing a little work on this, but we are partnering with Indigenous artists, paying them for original designs that we then sell on our shop for merchandise. And we promote their work and put the information out about who these wonderful artists are. We have 3 designs currently up. 2 of them, we have stickers and buttons over on the welcome table. And we have a new design coming out next month. So watch the website and our socials. Once again, sign up for the email list if you can. And of course, as a very small nonprofit, we always rely on donations and help and support from community networks. You know, we are one of the only Indigenous nonprofits in this country producing original content and supporting our Indigenous storytellers, journalists, and artists that is committed to the principles of disability and language justice. We are happy to do these things, but they are very costly. So if you are able to give, please give. You can go on our website to do so, and you can even set up a monthly, quarterly, or annual donation. And with that, I'm going to bring Angela up here in a minute. I feel like I've been talking to you all a great deal. Before we bring Melinda up, though, I want to talk a little bit about tonight's event and why it's so important and why I'm so excited about doing this. So this is in collaboration with Sacred Earth Solar, No More Silence. And I also want to say, in case I forget, thank you to Woolly Mammoth, who gave us this space and their staff for free. So, woo! So why we're here? The Centers for Disease Control has found that 30%, meaning 1 in 3 American Indian and Alaskan Native adults have a disability, and that Native people overall are 50.3% more likely to have a disability when compared to the national average. That's the highest of any other ethnic or racial group in the so-called US. The British Columbia Aboriginal Network on Disability has found that 30 to 35% of Indigenous people in so-called Canada have a disability. And in fact, anywhere that I've been able to find data in the English language, studies always find that the rates of disabilities or certain illnesses are the highest for Indigenous peoples. We also suffer some of the most direct effects of the climate crisis and environmental degradation, as well as violence enhanced with conflicts. So I want to tell you quickly what disability justice is, in case some of you are not familiar with this term. Naomi Ortiz, a writer, poet, facilitator, and visual artist, defines disability justice as the cross-disability framework that values access, self-determination, and expectation of difference. An expectation of difference means that we expect difference in disability, identity, and culture. To be included and part of society is about being able to be our whole selves, including all of our identities. Disability justice includes space for self-care, reflection, and hard discussions. The fabulous Tanya Bird was the co-founder and executive director of Sense and Valid, and one of its people whose works have informed the creation of this term of disability justice. Patty has said that it is a framework that was a reaction to the ways that the U.S. disability rights movement, quote, invisibilized the lives of people who live in intersection junctures of oppression. Disabled people of color, immigrants with disabilities, queers with disabilities, trans and gender nonconforming people with disabilities who are houseless, people with disabilities who are incarcerated, people with disabilities who have their ancestral land stolen, amongst others. Simply not demand and build a world rooted in decolonization and disability justice without having deaf, disabled, and ill Indigenous people leading us in this work. And I am so excited that we're able to have these conversations with our Indigenous relatives across borders, lands, and oceans, as well as to have our non-Indigenous or able-bodied neighbors and friends and community members here with us in these conversations and doing the work as we rebuild the world that we all deserve. There is so much that we can all learn from each other and how we support each other. So with that, I'm going to introduce Angela. So Angela Miracle Plateau, also known as Lunacy or Miss Chibraka, is a Plains Creek powwow dancer and bead girl and beadwork artist from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Angela started cultural dancing, Métis, and powwow at age 6 and continued her dance career as a hip-hop dance artist since 2003. She has been invited to perform, teach, and speak to countless countries throughout the world since 2016 and has toured the world as one of the lead dancers for the Hulu Slideshow. More recently, she was selected for the 2023-2024 cohort for the Kennedy Center Cultural Caucus and has been invited to teach and perform at the Kennedy Center on multiple occasions. I go on and off with her bio, but I'm just going to read a couple of highlights here. She has choreographed and performed at the 2017 Juno Awards. Has won first place at the Canadian Hip Hop Challenges and World Hip Hop Challenge, and World Hip Hop Championship bronze medalist. She has also, Angela's done so much. She has also been with for major recording artists such as TLC, Sean Paul, Lil Kim, Grandmaster Flash, and Busta Rhymes. So, with that said, I'm going to stop speaking at y'all and let her come up and do her thing.
Hello, Capri. And the dance I started doing in 2018 on Foundational Dancer. But this dance here is really special. The Cook dance, which is a traditional, ceremonial, and healing dance that originated from the Tuxtla Pueblo tribe of New Mexico. And I learned how to do this dance through my friend Sage Romero, who is from that tribe, and he gifted me with my first set of books. And he started teaching me, how to do a little one too. And then my friend Lisa OJ, she's from a conversation, taught me this foundation that you're about to see here today. So this is also a storytelling dance that shows how we're all connected in the circle of life. So you might see shapes like animals, mountains, the super tradition Mickey Mouse. No. And I enjoy. I'm just going to do a revision of the dance.
Audrey Bio is a European settler and an Indigenous and South Street. She grew up in Army brat between Calgary, Alberta, and Germany. As a young adult, she lived in Europe for 16 years. She studied, worked, and became a part of anti-authoritarian social movements fighting racism, fascism, and gender-based violence in Germany, France, and Italy. She returned to Turtle Island in 1998 and has been involved in the anti-colonial struggles in British Columbia and Ontario ever since. Audrey is a licensed paralegal who works with survivors of violence at Aboriginal Legal Services. She is a filmmaker and storyteller and the co-founder of No More Silence, working with other Indigenous women, trans, and two-spirit people to end gender-based violence and colonization. Terri Bio is a Mohawk plant member who has recently returned home from living in Toronto for over 40 years to 6 nations of the Grand River Territory. She is currently working as a mobile crisis rapid response team technician at the 6 Nations Crisis Hub, which aims to provide an immediate crisis response to mental health incidents on the 6 Nations territory in an attempt to divert these people in crisis from unnecessary police interactions and give them linked to specific services on the territory. Prior to this, she was a union staff representative with the Canadian Media Guild, which represents workers at various media organizations like CBC and APTN. She is also a member of the No More Silence Collective, and she hosts the Ron Pioneer Healing Lodge and her family's property on the territory. She is also a member of Protect the Tract, a project of the Haudenosaunee Hereditary Chiefs Council that brings awareness to the environmental and cultural duties the Haudenosaunee still hold over the Haudenosaunee Tract and the Grand River watershed in Southern Ontario, Canada. And then with us virtually is Melina Bio, who will show here on the screen in a minute. Melina is Lubicon Cree and was born in her community of Little Buffalo in Northern Alberta. She has worked on social, environmental, and climate justice issues for the past 20 years. Melina is the founder of Sacred Art, co-founder of Indigenous Climate Action, and the inaugural Indigenous Research Fellow at the Davis Suzuki Foundation, where her research focused on climate change, Indigenous knowledge, and renewable energy. She is the host of a TV series called Power to the People, which profiles sustainable climate solutions from renewable energy, food security, to equal housing in Indigenous communities across Canada. In 2021, Melina was named one of the 26 climate champions in Canada by the Canada Climate Law Initiative, and she received the Canadian Eco Hero Award in 2019. Melina has written for a variety of publications and produced numerous short films on climate change, environmental justice, just transition, water issues, energy sovereignty, and Indigenous cultural revitalization. She has also worked on the issues of murdered and missing Indigenous women since 2013, after the suspicious death of her sister Bella, whose case still remains unsolved. And unfortunately, Wanda Whitebird is unable to join us tonight, for her presence is missed immensely. Wanda's spirit and contributions to our communities in this world are valuable beyond the words that I've clustered here. I'm just gonna read her bio real quick, and then I'm gonna let Audrey tell us about the films we're about to watch. So Wanda Whitebird is of Bear Clan, is a member of the Tucktonak Mi'kmaq Nation in Nova Scotia. She currently resides in Toronto and has been active with No More Silence for 2 decades. Wanda is known for her groundbreaking work, bringing the drum and traditional Indigenous spirituality into prisons. She is also one of the first elders to embrace a harm reduction approach to working with substance users. She was recently honored with the Casey House Award for Social Justice and recognized for her years of work with Indigenous people living with HIV/AIDS. So we'll let Audrey here. We're about to watch two films. We'll let Audrey just kind of set us out and tell us something about them before we start them.
Okay, thank you so much. And welcome, and thank you all for coming out to this amazing in a room with people. The first event that we've had since COVID, since the pandemic, that people in the room. Of course, we're very sad about life of mine. The first one we're going to see is about one's journey, being a journey that has progressed since this film was made. We will talk about that in the film a little bit, and more when we're in our discussion. We collaborated with the Center for Independent Living in Toronto on a project during COVID, which we had initiated before the pandemic, and that ended up being a virtual project. Initially, we were reaching out to Indigenous community members with access barriers to find out what are the issues that you face when you're trying to participate in culture and ceremony. And then we ended up reaching out over Zoom. And in some weird ways, virtual does mean accessibility to a lot of people who creation couldn't participate. So we ended up having more people, I think, join these listening sessions that we did than we would have had if we had just done the old way, so basically, that's what this new world is about. It really was a new world to grasp to work with that technology.
Mi'kmaq elder Wanda Whitebird is not only known for her prison justice work across Ontario, she has also looked after the spiritual needs of Indigenous community members in Toronto for over 3 decades. She's well known as the leader of the Strawberry Ceremony at Toronto Police Headquarters on February 14th, where grief and loss are expressed over missing and murdered women, girls, trans, and Two-Spirit people. When she sustained a spinal cord injury, it meant huge changes for her life and how she worked with community.
My life changed on January the 23rd, 2019. Life is totally different. I was in the hospital, laid up in bed. It was emergency surgery, so I didn't know I was going into surgery. So I woke up in intensive care and at Toronto Western and realized that I couldn't move my legs and that I had been in surgery. I had emergency spinal cord surgery, which put me in a wheelchair. So life is different, totally, just from everything I do to where I live to what I do.
Going forward with the event in 2019 without her was unthinkable, so the organizing committee adapted and used technology to make it happen from Wanda's hospital room and got her medical team on board.
What they did do, because I couldn't get there in person, was they provided us privacy in my hospital room to be able to connect with ceremony through technology, which I'd never used. Like, I didn't know anything about FaceTime or whatever we were using. But, so I was there. I did ceremony in the hospital room at the same time that you were doing ceremony at College Park. And I had a helper as well. And it was really funny because between the time of my surgery on the wing of the hospital, everybody knew what February the 14th was. And they knew I was going to be doing ceremony at lunch. And so they were policing each other, saying, no, don't talk so loud. Don't go to the door of my room.
So hello everybody, here we are at police headquarters. It's our 14th annual February 14th, and we're going to be bringing Wanda Whitebird in over the phone.
I mean, that was the first time that I had ever been able, I understood text, but I could see all of you. I could see everybody at the ceremony, so I could see who was there. You know, and I could see the singers, and I could see, Bree dancing, and so it was really wild, because I never experience that kind of technology where I actually wasn't there, but I was. And that's the first time in the 14 years that we've been doing ceremonies that I could actually see the crowd. Because usually I'm in the center, down doing ceremony. So when we start, I usually just see that little circle of people around us. As we get started, that space fills up with people. But I don't see it fill up with people because I'm down on the middle there. But last year I could actually see the thousands, it felt like thousands of people in that space going up that walkway and up by the door to the police headquarters and down those steps. And like, it was amazing, yeah.
There had been technical difficulties, and it wasn't a perfect experience. But what mattered most was that Wanda and all of us knew she would continue to play that important role as our knowledge keeper, and we committed to include disability justice in our practice of ceremony. Two years later, and Zoom is a routine way for Wanda to join with community in ceremony and culture, like during the full moon.
Oh, speaking of Zoom, here it is. Here's the sacred fire. Like I said, I'd either bring it to me or bring it to them. And right now we're not actually at the ceremony because it's sundown, but not quite.
I'm going to burn the parts that I've cleaned up.
Okay, yeah.
Did I put these parts on the fire?
Yeah. And so the individuals who's my helper on the other end, she came by today and I gave her instructions on what we needed to do since the pandemic hit and we went into isolation and quarantine. Zoom has been able to bring my community to me. And so I don't feel so isolated. I don't feel so, lonely.
Wanda's experience has led No More Silence to initiate a disability justice project, which has involved talking to dozens of community members experiencing barriers and challenges to accessing ceremony. One of the project's goals is to build an accessible sweat lodge that will accommodate a diversity of needs.
I mean, the whole journey to get me here has been a journey of what I can and what I can't do. More of what I can do, not what I can't do. I try to focus more on what I can do. I still have to have a great quality of life. And so I'm just learning how to see the world from another perspective. That was great.
Was in collaboration with Sacred Solar and Melina. We've had a long relationship. I've known Melina for many years at the time. For the next question mentioned. Sadly, I met the whole chapter with Beatz systems in Toronto. Yes, I won't have seen any justice or truth around that. It happened in 2013. And Melina, as you've heard, is a warrior and collaborated with us on solarizing the property where Terri hosts the Runma feelings about Relaunch. So those are two short films that we're going to watch now.
Every project that Sacred Solar puts up is personal and it's relational, but this project really lies very close to home because my family has a murdered and missing Indigenous women where my sister's case is still unsolved. And we've had a close relationship as a family with No More Silence for over a decade.
So it's been a really long road to get here, but we have our Hummingbird Healing Lodge, and it has been an incredible past 6-7 months of sweats with community members who have really had incredible experiences here.
We want to prioritize trans two-spirit people, people with disabilities. Obviously, that's part of our mandate, is to be able to access them. And getting back to the reason why No More Silence was started in the first place, to provide healing and respite for the families of the missing and murdered.
As a murdered and missing Indigenous family member, I've attended the lodge myself, and it felt like it was very prioritized for that.
I witnessed the importance of the project a few months ago when there was a sweat for Melina and her family, and I was really surrounded around healing for the family, and right then I saw what this lodge does, and it was really special to see a family be brought that healing. Over the last, I'd say, 6 or more months, Sacred Solar worked along No More Silence to create a solar system on their Hummingbird Healing Lodge.
Building that array has been a fantastic experience. We had a lot of fun.
Yay!
For the months we worked with solar contractors to put in a solar PV system, as well as wire the entire bunkie that we're currently in right now with electricity.
It looks fantastic. Since we had to cut down a couple of trees in the front yard, but since that's been done, whenever it's sunny, that solar array has pumped out in 5 days more energy than my house uses in a month. So one of the best things about our lodge is that it's accessible to people in a wheelchair, and we've already proven that with having a special accessible sweat in which we had a person who was blind. We put Wanda in on a ramp. She's able to take her wheelchair in and conduct the sweat right inside the sweat lodge.
Bringing back ceremonial spaces has been a really heavy lift for many communities because it was literally illegal in Canada to have these spaces and places. So Sacred Solar thinks it's a major priority for communities to implement healing justice within our organizations, within our communities, within our nations.
I really find it so special that this space in the closest reserve to Toronto can be accessible to us LGBTQ+, for persons with disabilities, for Indigenous peoples from urban centres. My own family were urban Indigenous homeless people in Toronto, and I think something like this would have completely changed their lives to have this access to healing. And so, yeah, it's really special to see that we are breaking down those barriers. No More Silence is breaking down those barriers and providing ceremony for people who need it the most.
Communities are protecting their homelands, they're saving seeds, they're bringing back ceremony, they're revitalizing languages, they are literally fighting the impacts of environmental degradation and climate change all at the same time. So with the capacity that Sacred Solar has and the knowledge that we have to be able to build projects and be able to build solar installations where communities have light, power, heating, electricity, to be able to be on their homelands in their traditional territories but still have the technology to be able to be in spaces where they're warm, where they feel held and where they feel loved and they feel comfort and they can heal and they can protect and they can revitalize.
Whoa. Yes. Amen.
I might be too short.
Most people are shorter than me. Oh my God. Yeah, you kind of have to lean right.
You have to move it over a bit.
Yeah, I can.
No.
My little. Yeah.
Yes! Yay!
So welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here with us. So we're going to have a little conversation now with Terri and Melina. So one start with Melina and hear from her and the work she does, but I'm curious about how, the community has been welcomed or about physical injustice. Like, what has that looked like for you all, and how was it with, like, implementing that in native spaces and across movements?
Okay, so some Melina Jonathan, I guess that because Melina actually not in Toronto. I can say that it is our work is really welcomed by folks who experience access barriers. And that's about it. And I can't say that there have been any improvements. Transition people are following our lead. I don't see any yet. Yeah.
I'm just going to quickly introduce myself in more Chris, that's page you. So, say, we're going to carry on to our next. Ganyago Hage, Wakwao, Oswego, Milano, my name's Terri Bio. I'm Mohawk Wolf Clan from 6 Nations of Rider Territory. I basically, one of the things that I've been doing a lot of work in my own community where Relaunch is located. It is trying to bring a sense of harm reduction and disability justice to people in the community. And there's so many barriers there because our people are really strongly influenced by the idea that in order to do well, you can't be in substance use. So there's definitely I call it's like an obstacle. People are really, really hesitant to support harm reduction because they feel that it's re-addicting, whereas we're trying to civilize. And so it's really we really struggle a lot against this colonized Christianity of how people who are addicted or have access to the needs need to access ceremony. And so far we've not really had a lot of inroads. In my community we have a traditional longhouse religion as well. Which is already shown kind of a cultural revitalization that happened in the 1840s. But they're very strongly, there's this belief that you need to be of a good mind and use no substances. And even things like schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, and anxiety are seen as not as being an entitlement to the good mind. So getting the kind of buy-in in many communities is really difficult. And that's one of the one major stumbling block that I'm facing right now in terms of fully allowing the launch to be accessed. So that's still something that we'll have to be
Yeah, I know in my own experiences in a lot of the Native community in this country, I feel very locked out because of the lack of disability access, as well as just the lot of it where it is. And we have a lot of work to do still within our communities. So I think this is a really good one for Melina to jump in on. So how did you all land and come to this place of doing this work on the intersections of climate and our murdered and missing relatives and disability justice? What has it looked like? How is this all connected? So Melina, would you like to answer that?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Tansegwakia, Neo Melina Miowapin Labokam Masmo Niandihiao Kinaskum Tanawao. My name is Melina. My Cree name is Miowapin, and I come from the Lubukon Cree Nation. And so for me, as somebody that comes from an impacted community where literally my community, since I was born, has been dealing with environmental racism and extractivism. And I was on a blockade when I was 7 as basically an inheritance of land protection. We see the land as our mother, and, Indigenous peoples. Okay, I'll slow down. Audrey just told me to slow down. Thanks, Audrey. I'm a fast speaker because I've had to do climate and energy work and speak really fast in most spaces. And so I'm still teaching myself and my nervous system how to slow back down. And that I can still be heard in spaces. But having to speak in a lot of non-Indigenous spaces has led me to having to speak very quickly to get my points across. As somebody that's impacted from a community where we literally are burdening the shoulder and the cost of extractivism, we have oil, gas, logging, fracking, tar sands. So any type of extractivism you can think, and from that environmental racism, from that land degradation, we have many community members, including myself, that have health issues from the extractivism. And what I was just saying quickly earlier was that Mother Earth, Indigenous peoples call Earth our mother, and we see that the abundance and the love and the nourishment and the care that she's extended to us is a responsibility to care, and we have that reciprocal relationship with Mother Earth. And so the climate crisis is essentially humanity's disconnection from their responsibility to protect Mother Earth. And so these are all interconnected. And even when the first, colonial impact was on our lands, but also towards our women, there was violence against women since 1492. And just like we have seen, even with the story of glamorizing Disney fairy tales like Pocahontas, who was literally one of the first MMIWG people. So we can see that very much there's this impact on land, on our bodies, and on our people. And from the impact on the body, because of trauma, because of colonial impact, we now have also many health issues related to that. And so disability justice comes full circle into this. And even as a climate and energy campaigner and somebody that's worked to protect homelands for 20 years, I still feel very much a judgment and also a gaslighting from the own people that I'm in solidarity with, that are non-Indigenous, that don't have to deal with disability or invisible disability, to the point where I'm called, a delicate flower or, a princess because I have pain or I can't do certain things and I have to put up boundaries. And I think that's the thing that, unfortunately, within our own communities or within movement spaces, we still see very much an ableist way of being because of the ways in which we've been taught as organizers to constantly put the burden on our bodies, and not that self-care and taking care of one another, expecting one another to basically be the sacrificial lambs of our society to pursue justice, to pursue climate, environmental justice, and social justice for our peoples. But yet, a lot of times we leave the movement spaces. Many of the people that I've worked with have left movement spaces because of basically having disability and not being respected within our movement spaces, and or deciding to leave the world, deciding to leave their life because they aren't supported in the ways in which we need to support each other. So all of this work is so interconnected and it affects us on a multitude of levels.
Thank you so much. I often can't help but wonder if I didn't grow up around oil and gas. mining and rains that I have, the autoimmune diseases I have. And also, how much better would my health be if I could get the healthcare I need now and distribute with respect while trying to access it. So when we talk about these things, like, I think we kind of, Melina kind of touched on this, but I'd love to hear a little bit more. What are some of the experiences been, Terri and Audrey, doing this work? Like, how has it been perceived in that by non-Indigenous people, maybe doing climate work in South Canada and in these spaces?
I think that in a lot of ways, a lot of our allies who take direction, the ones who take direction, are really honest and they understand what we're trying to do. I find that the biggest barrier actually has been our own people. And I think that part of that is around the whole understanding of the colonized. And when you get colonized, there's a clash between your own Indigenous people's values and what the colonizer expects, right? So there's also that whole stereotype of the very able-bodied noble warrior that we constantly are having to deal with. And the idea that you can still be a warrior type of things, even while you're disabled, doesn't seem to get the traction in our communities as it does outside of us. I find that there's a lot more respect and understanding and wanting to get to a place in a lot of our allies and not so much in our communities. So that's kind of a really interesting focus. And so I look a lot at, how do we build those strengthening relationships so that we can model what we're doing in community so that more people get on board with what we're trying to do. And like I said, I found the biggest supporters are my non-Indigenous friends. And they are all like, wow, that's amazing work. This is cutting edge stuff you're doing. And my own family and friends are kind of like, huh? Why are you expending energy on something that just seems so why? But the reality is that all of us are done at some point. If we live long enough, we're going to have to. I mean, when you start kidding out, it's good. I find myself going, wow, these are really important. And that means you can't access things the way they used to. I also have kidney issues, and it's an ongoing battle with that. And I know that as I get older, getting into things that are, what I want to do are going to be more and more of a challenge. So it's really important for me as a person to try and expand the idea of how do we deal with this? How do we access ceremony for people who are disabled? How do we be in a community where we are getting more and more disabled people and yet there's still a stigma against it? And how do we break through that obstacle of like, we're supposed to do this thing when the reality is we're not? Colonization has done a number of things. And so that is part and parcel of what we're trying to undo. And that's what colonization is for me, is like understanding that these intersections of climate justice, disability justice, getting our land back, they're all related and we all have to like figure out how we're going to support that or, making sure that our people are liberated and that all people spent some time today at the Black History Museum, and I was overwhelmed at that. That was an incredible understanding. I learned things that I didn't know, and I think it was really important to see what colonialism is. Make no mistake, save for this colonial project, and what it has done to these lands, right? Because you bring people over who are disconnected from their homelands. What does that mean for these lands here? What does that mean for all of us going forward? How do we get into a place where we are all liberated? And for me, that was really important. I'm really glad I'm here today. I felt that it enhanced my understanding of what liberation actually is. So I wanted to acknowledge my Black relatives who are all here on Turtle Island because we share some of the same struggles and the same understanding that we are not free until all is free. And I think that that's really where the justice piece. We work for that as an overarching idea around how we're doing things. It's not just for the disabled communities, it's for everyone. And if we can model this on a bigger scale, we're doing the work of colonialism.
It actually brings to mind, I was just on a loading land, which is San Francisco Bay Area last week, and I went to the Black Panther Party Museum. And I went in knowing a fair amount, but they did so many amazing things. Like they took part in the 504 sit-ins, which is a very crucial part of disability history. They went and met with the Zapatistas in so-called Mexico. You know, they ran ambulances taking community members to and from doctors and hospitals. Like they did so much great stuff. And these are things we need in our communities now.
Yeah.
Audrey, I'd love to hear you talk about some of the work of No More Silence and what you all have been doing.
Well, we would aspire to be doing the greatness of the Black Panther Party for sure. But what we definitely share is this understanding of like just basic meeting communities' needs, like empowering our community is the focus. I think it's important to know that No More Silence works outside all culture institutions. We're turning 20 this coming summer. We never incorporate the not-for-profit. We always just remain. We have a bank account to get space. We keep split money and we get calls from the money laundering. Why did you travel for $146? No one said we can't drive. We need to know. Wow, there were some monsters that I reversed myself. But it's not but yeah, like we started around missing and murder. And I've always understood the systemic reasons for the missing and murder, which is colonization and genocide, just turn to genocide. It's actually come to an actual inquiry in Canada, where that final report also did genocide. So we've been talking about movement for 20 years that has shifted the narrative to that point. So we're really proud of that. But we have to mention, of course, the Grannies and the MPs from Mexico's downtown Lisa. We've been doing this work way longer even than us. We mentioned the strawberry ceremony where we gather in front of the police headquarters every year, so that in 18 years. You saw one of us joining us from our hospital, and you might have noticed how cold bullet, because it's Canada, and it's sometimes minus 11 minutes. But that's going to be so cold. But we do that, and that's starting in Vancouver with the Memorial March. They started 30 years ago when a woman was dismembered by Sunflow Solar, and the family wanted to pick Valentine's Day as a day to just show up. And it was not a protest; it was about two locals and breathing through the community. And that's what we center to. Like we do that to headquarters because we want to underline state simplicity, police in action. Moving over police and under protect. And one of them abolished. Yes. No abolished. So it's always been about like love, like just showing love for community. And disability justice is an actual extension of love. The other important thing about myself is that we're always about building networks. That's why we're here. We've never really built a network with the folks across the medicine line. We have been to Palestine. I've been to Palestine 3 times. And today we have to remember the Nakba, which started in the 15th and shamefully Toronto being released the Israeli flag. Our allies were there to things like that. But I don't think least.
Yeah, settler, you say settler colonials, they together and people sit on each other, right? And it is classic. Those settler colonial parallels in the sea, in South Africa, and Palestine, here. So we're always trying to build those networks. We visited Oaxaca and Colombia, and they were here. Disability justice is the latest focus for us as we age and as our members. One day you saw on some things and then you realize it's how we do our own practices. We don't claim to be free of that. If anything I learned called thought is process. And as much as I love this sort of nobody that's behind, we don't always make it. One is not here. And very sad. I would say that they goes to the mountains, the meetings, and getting beyond facing and staying able to capitalist, realize capital society is not valued violence and art production. And their view are disposable. Yes, so you can't fly. They haven't got together to just take out a seat so that our other and all those barriers, and yet we have to aspire. And we have to aspire to that moving up honestly as much as we can. I was fortunate enough to go to Palestine in 2018 with More Silence. We had a project called Indigenous Landback. That's the most gorgeous. I wanted to go to Palestine. And I think that for me was a lot of the beginnings of how I wanted to view disability justice, because we were there when this community called OX, and it means the obstacle. It was a Palestinian community in the Jericho Valley, and it was basically surrounded on all sides by Israeli settlements. But they were doing their own thing. They built their houses and they were growing herbs and making yogurt, doing things that they were doing in their lands for millennia, growing olive trees and all of the things. The leader of their village was a man in a wheelchair who had been paralyzed by an Israeli cycle when he was 16 or something like that. And he was patient and wise and amazing. And I was like, we need to be cultivating leadership wherever it is and however it appears, however it comes to us. And one of the things that he said that I still remember from the translator, he was like, we just do our own thing and they can't, and they have to let us do it because we're still here in our lands. And for me, that has become a real mantra around how I want to do my work. Because it's a community right of our territory. We're literally in the western end of our territory from millennia. We're literally still in our own lands. And so we're doing our own thing in our lands, and they can't stop us. We go our car, we go the Three Sisters. We're trying to bring everybody together. We're doing these things that are inherently our traditional ways, modernizing them because as the home shown here, incredibly pragmatic, and we will adapt however we need to in order to survive. And so we're doing these things, and the wider culture around us is still there. We can participate in it when we want to. But this idea of like doing your own thing on your own lands, despite everything, despite colonialism, despite all of this, that was a huge lesson and a huge biggest inspiration to continue this work. I mean, that was a fantastic day there. You can have a big mural on the wall that says water is life, and which is also very much of an Indigenous thing, and we say all the time, we honor the water. In United, we say the Colonialism, meaning we love the water. And that is how I want you to remember that space and that connection between Palestinian resistance and Turtle Island resistance. And so I think it's really important to try to do your thing. I kind of like think, that old piece slogan. We're thinking locally, but we're acting locally. And that is how we get justice in our communities, into our nations, onto the planet. And that's what we just like.
So I did not see the screen to see Melina, but I want to offer her the opportunity to jump in and give some thoughts or maybe talk about go in another direction if she would like to.
Oh, I was just so busy listening that I didn't have any. Let's see. Some of the things that I actually wanted to add to is I feel like similar to what Terri said earlier around like our Black brothers and sisters and relatives around kind of that land connection, but also that piece around healing justice. And that's something that alongside disability justice that I think is really important, because I feel like healing justice is almost like, I would hope, a preventative measure, preventative methods, preventative practices. Sorry, I have a dog that's very anxious behind me because my partner is not home. But the healing justice pieces that can go alongside disability justice as well, because I feel like with disability justice, sometimes we also we have to be proactive and reactive. We have to have them alongside the preventative, because I think a lot of our people, the ACEs, if you think about the ACEs study, and I had about 3 years being able to work with Resba Menakem, who talks about just like somatic abolitionism, which is where because we've become so disembodied with trauma as Indigenous peoples, as BIPOC peoples, that we start, especially from a young age with trauma, we develop, like you said earlier, Jen, these the health issues that we develop from trauma, from environmental racism, from environmental degradation. A lot of these come from early childhood development. And here we are with, high rates of disabilities within our communities, and yet a lot of times our families and our people aren't sorry. I'm gonna have to put myself on mute for a second as my partner comes in. I'm just gonna pass it back over because we have a very anxious dog at home. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna put myself on mute so he doesn't bark in your guys' ears. But I'll come back to my point. I'm just gonna pass it back really quick. My apologies.
Thank you. I understand. I have 2 cats at home, and one of them loves to Zoom bomb. Thinking everyone thinks it's cute. So let's talk a bit about the solar panels, and what that has been like. What has the outcome been of putting the solar panels on the Relaunch? How has this been for community? And what was it also like? We down here in so-called US, like I can't see firsthand, but I see the photos and the videos, and it really looks like you all have brought a lot of the community together just to do this work. So I'd love to hear more about what that's all been like.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I missed one of the things that we got up there with thanks to Sacred Solar and Serena, who we saw in the film. She's actually my daughter's best friend. So we get to see her a lot at my house. Since we put that solar array in October of last year, we've offset 3 tons of carbon. The array itself has produced it's almost 4,000 kilowatt hours in that time. My house only uses between 35 and 38 kilowatt hours in a month. This thing is going out more than my bill actually today, and I'm at negative $25. And my entire house, and the way it's wired, or it's like everything is smart out my house. It's not even making a dent. Like this array is coming out. And we call it this, and I want to give you a little, it's a Haudenosaunee legend that we recently called the Sunflow Array, is that when Simon fell to earth, the natural star, before Brother Sun came to shine upon the earth, she asking. The creator, who's one of her children, knew that he needed to go, so he made a sunflower. And the sunflower originally shot on days until the sun. No, like the world. So I like to think of our solar array as being sunflower. And it's like literally, every time I go by it, I'm like so excited. People on my community get all on. Where did you get that? How did you build it? Where is, like, how are you, let's see, I'm very happy to tell. Yeah, right? Like, this thing is pumping out way more. We are literally, like, not wasting anything. And our bunkie is lit and it's warm. So we can have sweats if we want to all year round, and it got a warm place to change. Having that is just been a focal point in the community that people are constantly asking me, how did that happen? What's it doing? And so we're a sign that says Sunflow Solar Array, say their solar, kind of like give information about how they did it. But actually had 5 people in the community message me going, how do I do this for my house? And because it's right in our front door, like people were great and they were like, that's easy. Like people want these solutions, they want these alternatives. And having a hook up, like say there's solar in a pocket to tell people has been really, really helpful. And hopefully Melina and Stu may get a little more projects from that. Well, one of the projects we're doing actually in the next week, I believe over the summer, is they're solarizing one of our longhouses, the Sour Springs Longhouse. It's probably the most progressive one in Europe. They're building a seed keeping place that's going to have their heritage seeds kept. And they're solarizing that community space so that they can always have hot water. You don't have to worry about the cost. Because hydro costs on the grass, because we're in a remote area, we're remote for Southern Ontario, it is really expensive. So this is really cut down costs. It was an initial outlay of a lot of money, but we were able to get grants from the Indian collectives. Shout out to the Indian collective, they've been awesome for us. And that's another way to empower communities, right? Like, let's figure out alternative needs that aren't from the government, that aren't from extractive industries. They want a lot of money in native communities. I call them guilt money. They're constantly trying to give money to communities because they know they know it. They know it. Yeah, they know what they've done. Yeah. And this is their way of trying to like throw money to make the problem go away. Well, one of the reasons why I always want more silence is that we refuse to take government money. We refuse to take extraction money. And we figured out a way to fundraise in community with professional organizations and unions, which are, basically the organizations in working class. So we are not doing government, we're not doing capitalist corporations, and we're just crowdfunding and fundraising for our students.
Maybe it's a good time to talk about how we're expanding. We are super excited. Throw out with photos. When you saw the film, there was a beautiful drum shop. You might have noticed that there was this beautiful barn. So we've been dreaming about fixing that into a fully accessible healing wellness center. These are our neighbors who are nesting in the barn. This is the barn. And this is what 1946. The crew in front there, as Terri was mentioning, we really had a great experience with that church. They don't get showing up for racial justice. Especially with white people who really walk their talk when it comes to moving money from white people's pockets to Black Indigenous people of color pockets. They crowdfunded funded for us when we lived in Palestine. It makes $2,000 with days.
And they have been on the ground getting really, really dirty. Like literally, you're going to see some photos, the next photo is we decided to save money by cleaning up the barn ourselves before the builders come. And Terri had mentioned it would be jumping there, but I didn't really look until a couple of days before organizing the first crew. And it was kind of horrifying to see this is the upstairs loft, and this is bad shit. I was like 30 something there. It's very toxic, very dangerous to breathe in.
Yeah.
So we had people who went out there in full hazmat gear with respirators. And it took a cruise of 3 people. Remarkably little time. Quickly. They went in there and they said it was 3 days, 3 to 4 hours shifts, 3 to 5 hours, I think it took to clear out of this farm. So that was the first job was preparing in a corner. And then we were able to, by the builder came with a dump trailer, shoved out the window. And that person got involved with that. He made the mistake of not having hazards. The sickness of the completely PCs in my hair. I stood under a guard. Oops, we're having out before I got out of my car. But the next photo you can see the change, the difference. This is what I will say. This is going to be our, there's going to be 3 guest rooms in the back, so people will be able to stay overnight. There's going to be a big open space for ceremony and for gathering. We may even, when if you never have money, we'll put it in the second level so that you can also have like more rooms. And we're dreaming about those hanging chairs. And you see in the spot, I think this is going to be basically a spot. So the next photo looks at the progress down. This is where the cows got fed. And we're envisioning here that the lounge area would be when people come out of the summit. So we have summit. We have just the launch for slides, but we also want to meet with the therapeutic healings. And this is where when you come out of the summit, you will have those gorgeous chairs where you can just stay down and have a nap afterwards. So this took, again, it took 3 work days for 3 to 6 people carrying stuff into the dumpster and then digging up the near 30 year. And the next photo you see what it looks like now. This is all like people like surgeon friends who want to see this. And right now, as we speak, the people, phone people are in there with phone installation. On the next photo is this was before, and it's going to be our office. Next to that, the sauna will be behind there. It's going to be fully accessible to the upstairs of the ramp that goes up in the middle of the building. And then the next photo is what it looks like now. You will eventually that there will be an office there. The sink and the coffee maker is over there. The bull on the other side, where the bull used to live, and where we're doing a massage and repeating what's in there. So we look at us really huddled when we talk about this, and we're kind of big effectiveness that we would dare to just make a spa. Like, why don't we get a spa? Like, why don't we just get a spa? And part of the whole idea is like to bring in healing practitioners from my communities, like, offering services to people. And as a healing place, so many of our people have faced, criminalization through dissent. As Six Nations, we have active land reclamation areas going on where people have been literally thrown in jail for doing that. There's been a lot of violence around land reclamation. People are traumatized. And I like to, one of the things I've learned in working in the community with our people have been fighting for 500 years. There's a lot of trauma in our people. As the Haudenosaunee were probably the first people who had contact with Europeans, and we have the two wampum as a result of that. In 1604, we met the Dutch and created a treaty. And so therefore, we've always been in contact. First it was the Dutch, then it was the French, then it was the English, then it was the Americans. And over that course of time, all we've been installed in fighting. The first thing that happened to us was that smallpox came in and decimated 98% of our population. So right from the beginning, there was nothing but trauma and the loss of like 98% of our population. And I find that just horrific to think about. And then after that, we were fighting the French. Then after that, we were like struggling against the American Revolution. And then in the Haudenosaunee area, recipients of the first American genocidal campaign was the Sullivan campaign in 1779, which literally burned us out of New York State, which is where our homeland is. So we were forced to be refugees in our homelands. And people have never gone home with it. I really believe that there's so much trauma in our communities because of the awful processes of colonialism. So then after you're no longer creating colonial things, then you're fighting Christians, because then the residential schools came, the Indian Act, all of those things cause trauma in a community. And so that's one of the reasons why disability justice and healing justice is really important. We're literally 7 generations in of trauma. And so my people believe very strongly in that the decisions that you do now affect 7 generations down the line. So we want our next 7 generations to be healthy. We need to be looking at how we're healing ourselves. How do we go forward? How are we going to reclaim and keep our traditions alive? But also embrace the fact that we have nation, like we have neighbors from nations all over the world. And how do we be in a space and a place that accepts all of those things, but also carves out space for ourselves. And so that's kind of like where I look at our next 7 generations are going. But first we need to get some healing space. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very, very dedicated to having this healing knowledge become more of a reality. Because it's literally, I look at it as recite for colonialism. Because we've been dealing with it for 5 years. And so I think that, going forward, this is our next great project. Audrey and I are both, we're starting to look at what do we want to do after we stop being for students, and watch it blossoming something is kind of like where I see myself in the next 2 years. I think that we're on track to do something really special. And hope that maybe a couple years we come back and tell you what we're doing.
Could I chime back in?
Melina speak, and then God, I had so many questions I want to talk to you about, but we're running short on time, so we'll let Melina speak and then open up for a couple of questions from the audience, and including folks online. So, Melina, take it away.
Thanks, Jen. Sorry about that and the barking dog. Yeah, similar to what Audrey was just saying, the point that I was trying to make earlier was around trauma and how it's so important for our communities to heal from trauma because of the intergenerational trauma that all of us have experienced, being Indigenous peoples, being BIPOC peoples. Myself, I'm the first of my family to not attend residential schools. My dad and all of my aunts and uncles went to residential school. And that's, such a huge trauma that our communities are still feeling and reeling from, and then also trying to heal from. But there's not a lot of healing spaces. A lot of our communities have been Christianized, Catholicized, and that continues, in my opinion, the cycle of colonialism and sometimes trauma with living in those colonial values that are not Indigenous. And so when we're indigenizing disability justice or indigenizing healing justice, it's making sure that we have safe spaces for healing and also understanding how our nervous systems even react. As a young activist, I wasn't taught any of those skill sets in my 20s and my 30s. I had to learn them in my late 30s and 40s after I became bedridden from 20 years of organizing, because I wasn't taught how to regulate my nervous system. And so I think it's so important that not only do we have people on the ground and like what was said, where we're taught to be these warriors that have no limits. We should be like Superman or Superwoman or super person, where we have to be these warriors where we don't actually tend and care for ourselves or for those closest around us. And so similar to how we're actually a part of the altar, we're not part of a sacrifice. You know, we shouldn't be the sacrificial lambs continually to continue this work. How do we bring healing alongside? And so when Audrey and Terri approached me to help solarize through Sacred Earth, the Healing Lodge, it just made so much sense for us to ensure that we are creating safe spaces of healing, because even within healing lodges, you know, a lot of us who are immunocompromised or have visible or invisible disabilities can't go into lodge. Even now, myself, I haven't been back into a lodge other than the lodge that No More Silence runs because of people being willing to take COVID tests, you know. And so a lot of us aren't even able to go into our ceremonial spaces because there's, you know, the ableism that continues to be pervasive. And so also for the front line, you know, so Sacred Earth Solar also works with frontline communities, and we give out healing justice grants and distribute healing justice for people coming off of frontline impacted, you know, basically being brutalized and criminalized by police. And so how do we support those who are putting their bodies on the front line? How do we support them coming off of the front lines? And a lot of times there is a complete lack of recognition for that sacrifice and a complete lack of support for that sacrifice, that people, you know, leave their jobs and then they leave and they come back injured a lot of the times from going through that brutalization of police, and there's no supports for them. And so that's a part of also of the healing justice and the disability justice, to acknowledge that these types of supports are needed for frontline community members, because a lot of times it's very patronizing. And, you know, myself, where people will be like, oh, you're so strong. And it's like, but what about when we're weak? What about when we need support? And that was just not there when I was bedridden 4 years ago. And it gave me a really big perspective shift of like, who am I in community with? Am I just in community with people that are there when I'm just strong, are there when I'm vocal, or am I in community when I am weak, when I can't advocate for myself, when I can't lift a cup of tea, when I can't dry my own hair, when I can't put a t-shirt on? You know, who is that in our community, and how do we create those communities of care? Because that's the kind of community that I want to be a part of.
That sounds nice. So we're at our time, but I do want to give the audience just a few minutes to ask some questions if you would like. Anyone here in the room or online, any other question? Here, yeah, is this one? Yeah, okay. We're just want to say thank you for listening to the city and for being here. I received so much. Appreciate it. Okay, there's two different topics I'm really curious about. So just going to bring both out quickly. One is the topic of quick time, disability time, and how they or may not be related or connected to Indigenous and Native time. And the other topic is how to heal or cultivate a relationship with land when disability kind of necessitates living in an urban area, because needing access to public transportation and doctors, and medical care, and all that. So anyway, those are just a couple of topics that came to mind for me. In terms of because I lived in the city for 40 years before I went back home. And one of the things that I found is that finding a green space just to sit in and kind of commune with the trees that are there, the plants that are there. And if you like in Toronto, there's a lot of squirrels and raccoons, things like that. The animals. And just to be able to sit there, even if it's like, it's too cold or whatever, just to be out in something that's green is really, for me, that was hugely important. One of the nice things about Toronto is that there's a lot of green space, there's a tree, and we're out on a lake. So we can go down to the lake shore. In the area that's so bad, you can use the 10-year-old space for a brief amount of time. And for me, those were really
helpful. Like just even if it was like a little plot of like water garden space behind a condo. Finding those spaces is really, really important. I find it really interesting about the concept of unique time and disability time because we do notice when people are disabled, they do require more time to get things need to start, maybe a little later while you're already gathered in. Native people, like one of the things that we always say on the res is that if something is scheduled for 7:30, you might as well lay the wall turning up to 22. 28 or so, that's not the start, at least 10:8. We have this one saying, and I read our ceremonies that they start when it's so that's kind of how we try to sort of say we're not sort of around here. But when they're on time, like, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We just try to follow.
Yeah, was one of the things that was articulated in the listening section that we did that people wanted. And that we will be able to do. And we're really lucky that 6 nations and not a lot, it's only an hour and a half. So it will need, communities really anxious to come. And it's expensive because it needs renting an accessible plan. And COVID made that incredibly moderate. Yes, people got rid of the meals that they had. And now it's very, very cheap. Like last summer we had to book. In this summer we had to book all the weekends. We had to book for 2 months ago to even get to Minnesota of that, and that's to accommodate voucher. Never mind, a bigger bus that could bring a few vouchers and 3 people. So it is challenging, but that is the opportunity that we have that and why we're having guest students so that we can stay overnight and to make that actually happen for more people.
I didn't catch the first question, but the last question, even, I had to go on medical leave and I was pretty housebound. And one thing that really helped me was actually a plant. If you can't leave the house and you can't go to that green space, and I agree with Terri, find that little green space, that tree, that rose bush, that you can sit with. But for me, it was a plant, and it was just tending to a tobacco plant in my house and, watering it and singing to it and talking to it and thanking it for the offerings that it would give me to be able to grow my own offerings to land. So I think it sometimes can be even just plants within your house if you're housebound. It really helped me during my medical leave.
I actually have a traditional tobacco plant, a ceremonial plant for my ancestral homelands at home. And so that really just gives me a moment of calm living in, a high-rise building in the middle of DC. So I think we can take one more question. Anyone else in the room or online have a question? Anyone? All right. Well then, thank you so much for being here tonight, Wanda, and for bearing with us on all our technical challenges, and for joining online. As Audrey mentioned earlier, both of those films are available to view on YouTube. We will also, in the next couple of weeks, put up a much more polished video of this event that will include the films and for everyone to see. Oh, and you got
remember. Yeah. Am I loud enough for everyone? Or do I need to back? Okay. All right. I do have one question. Sorry, forgot. I was when I was watching. With the sweats, do you have anything how do you accommodate also for Two-Spirit folks? Because I know that there are often gender roles in ceremonial spaces.
We don't have, there's no threshold, there's no rigidity around where you want to sit or how you want to sit. It's basically, you let us know what you need and you come in. And we are
And there's no Two-Spirit sites, exclusive Two-Spirit sites, so that folks can just be anonymous sites. One of the reasons why Wanda was really useful in this process is that as an elder, she doesn't believe in a lot of the really restrictive gender rules. She also is a harm reductionist. So her whole thing is that if you need to sweat, you need to sweat. There are a lot of some of the traditions, especially in Canada, have long created a gym where that you have to be fat. It's always sober. And sometimes that's not possible. Yeah. It's just not possible. People need sweats. And if that's the case, as long as you're healthy and you can take it, come in. And one of the things that we have found too is that garage, it heats up really well and efficiently. So when we open the door, if it's too much for people, we're really trying to be mindful of what people need in space at the time they're sweating. And so we try to make it so that, they're able to access air, they're able to get out if they need to. All of those things that I've been in those spots before where the person eating was really restricting and that is severe. You had to have a sweater on. Men could come in as much with as little as they wanted, but women had to be full of condoms. I found it really restrictive. You had to sit in certain spots, and if you're disabled in any way, trying to get in and out was flat when you have to sit on the ground is flat. So one of the things that we're so we get benches, maybe a little bit just sit on if you don't want to sit on the floor. There's places that use a higher bench. Well, it gets really hot. There's so many times I put people up there. And we just try to make it so that you're accessing ceremony with your needs being met. And I think that that's really also part of one of the biggest teachings that I got from Juan is that you meet people where they are and you offer ceremony regardless. So I think that that's kind of how we do it ourselves. And since we didn't say it explicitly, we are trying to address across disability, diversity of disability. So it isn't only folks with mobility issues. There was a line when we had this with all the some listening sessions. There was someone who had been turned away from the wild trauma. Just told them they had a lot of idiots. You can't see, you could fall to the rocks. And she was hardworking, she was so grateful to be able to have experience just like with one that she was. It changed her life. She's so changing it. And we had a lady who was there from the old age just to be with her. And just continue to focus and be her whatever she needed. Then we have folks who have PTSD, who might need a kind of light, where there's others who completely not light and say it's not a little ceremony, it's silver light. No, if people need light, why don't we let people in the flashlight? It's about, and as long as you come to love in your heart and respect the medicine, for the ceremony, Lana's very humble in that. She does not think. She's like, it's the creator has brought you here, and here's your reason. It's not for me to decide. So that's beautiful.
I think too.
Melina, would you like to respond?
Yeah. So my dad taught me, my dad was hidden from residential schools till he was 9, 10, and he was only taught in Cree and taught our stories and language and cultures and values only in Cree. My kukum and most of my grandparents didn't speak English. So it's unfortunate with colonialism, things have become very gendered and very binary. And my dad says that wasn't the case previous to colonialism, that there was actually up to 5 genders and a spectrum and a diversity of ways of being in our community as Nihiao people. And so even that our spiritual people were two-spirited, that's where the term comes from, that you could embody a multitude of ways of being. And so those were actually our spiritual people a lot of the time. And so it's just really unfortunate how colonialism has impacted even our ceremonial spaces. And so I think that's a part of the reclaiming of ways of being within ceremony and ensuring that all our people, all our relatives, our two-spirit relatives are included and respected and feel safe within our ceremonies, because ultimately they were the ones that had led our nations in the past. And so I think, I don't know if people know that, but that's what I've been taught, that's the case, that our people were led by our ceremonial people and two-spirited people in the past. And so I feel like it's coming back full circle, and that's a part of decolonizing.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you to Audrey, Terri, Melina, Wanda, Angela for dancing, Billy, our ASL interpreter, and to the Refreshing Colonialism crew here. We have Garden at the welcome table. We have Nika over here at this middle computer. And then we have AC at our third computer. So, thank you for talking tonight and for watching and supporting. Please donate if you're able. Sign up for the email list, take the magazine, do all those good things, and follow us on social media. Check out our website, refreshingcolonialism.org. So, thank you. Bye.